Well, an acne treatment product from several brands are now being recalled because they have elevated.
All right, so I've seen this benzene scare cycle in and out several times in the last few years, and I wanted to break it down. So I'm not a chemist, but I'm a perfumer who is highly invested in this stuff, and I'm super interested in it because I care about the safety of clients who buy perfumes from me. So I always fully research this stuff to make sure that all my products are safe. So first things first is that benzene is considered a contaminant in the world of cosmetics. It's not supposed to be there. So when a recall happens due to benzene contamination, as we see in this piece, it's because benzene was detected and not because a company was caught using benzene in formulation of any of their products. It's really a case of contamination. And in this case, even if there are trace amounts, all of it has to be recalled and removed from the shelves. So how does a benzene get there in the first place? Some may argue that it's in the decomposition. I don't know if I said that right. This is the French in me. The decomposition of other materials such as benzoyl peroxide. But that's highly unlikely. For benzoyl peroxide to turn into benzene, it requires high temperature, something closer to 500 degrees Fahrenheit to almost 1,000 Fahrenheit for it to turn into benzene. Some people say that it's if you have benzoyl peroxide in a car, and a car will only go up to 158 Fahrenheit, which is just not enough. So that is highly unlikely. There are some solvents, however, like toluene, which is used in nail polish and certain hair dyes that can decompose into trace amounts of benzene. So what are the most likely ways for benzene to end up in products? And I'll focus on cosmetics and fragrances just to keep it a little bit simple. So the first way benzene can end up in products is through the sourcing of raw materials. So when it comes to the manufacturing of certain materials, specifically the synthetic ones that are derived from petroleum or petrochemical sources, there's a possibility there for benzene to be introduced, mostly because benzene is used in this process through a process of synthesis. So when we're talking about synthesis of products, it's like we're mixing things together to turn them into something else. Now, before you freak out, benzene is extremely useful in different capacities. So we actually use it in pharmaceuticals. So we use it in this process of synthesis to create phenols, which we then use in the making of different pain relievers like Tylenol, aspirin, ibuprofen, etc. But keep in mind that we're talking about the transformation of benzene into another material, not benzene itself. So it's very important to keep that in mind. But however, benzene is introduced at one point in the chain, right? So there's a possibility of contamination. And normally in the rigorous process of refining material, benzene is supposed to be removed. But, right, there's always a possibility there. So it could be introduced with material that hasn't been sufficiently refined or through cross-contamination with contaminated equipment, for example. It could also be introduced in aerosol type of products, like sprays that are under pressure because of the propellants that are added to it. For example, butane, isobutane, or propane can sometimes be contaminated with benzene. So much like raw materials if the propellant hasn't been sufficiently purified. The next one is degradation of certain ingredients. I kind of touched upon it earlier, but let's be a little bit more specific. The first situation of this is more related to the food industry when you mix sodium benzoate with vitamin C. In certain extreme conditions, can that degrade into benzene? So when that mix is exposed to heat and UV light, so the sun. The second case is related to citrus oils when also it's exposed to heat or UV light, so direct sunlight. And most of the time it degrades into benzaldehyde, but there's always a little chance that it will turn into benzene. So just more reason to follow the rules on how to properly store perfumes, which is away from direct sunlight and in a cool environment. The last opportunity for benzene to be introduced into products is through packaging. And it's particularly for styrene and plastic. So if a product is in styrene and in plastic and is exposed to heat and UV rays, again, there's a possibility that benzene will leak into the product. So benzene contamination through packaging can be avoided through better storage mechanisms and also, maybe just avoiding products that are in plastic and styrofoam. But I assume that we all kind of knew that. There's also, microplastics, right? So there you have it. And I'm not arguing that benzene is bad for our health. That's actually fact. It's not great for us. But I don't think we need to freak out when it comes to the world of cosmetics, which is highly regulated. And, this is actually good news. That means that, a mechanism worked and they were able to detect it and it's off the shelves. So I think in a way it's great. It just shows that something in the system is working to protect us. But since we're on the subject of benzene, I do think it's important to be aware of it and where most of our common exposure is coming from. One of them is tobacco. That's a big culprit. So if you're a smoker or you're around a smoker, you might want to rethink that. Fuel combustion, so any vehicle exhaust. So if you're in an urban environment, there are more chances that you'll be exposed to benzene. Petroleum-derived products, and I'm not so much concerned about the cosmetics products as I am about the more industrial products, like gasoline, solvent, paint. So like if you work in a gas station, there are more chances you're going to get exposed to benzene. If you work with paint on the daily, there are way more chances of you being exposed to it. And then there are household products. I don't want to scare you, but you could find them sometimes in trace amounts in cleaners, pesticides, and certain varnishes. So just be a little bit more aware of all of this. And if you are a chemist and I said something wrong, please, by all means, comment below and correct me. And I hope for everyone else, this has helped you shed some light on benzene.